Hello, class. For this lecture, we're going to be covering Chapter 5 in your textbook, which is on the planning function. And really what Chapter 5 does, it just gives us an overview of what planning is, what's the process of planning, some of the key terminology that you're going to be seeing over the next few chapters. So it's a relatively brief chapter. It deals a lot with definitions and just kind of outlining what the planning function is. And it talks about planning and strategic planning at different levels of the organization. So that's what we're going to talk about in this chapter. In later weeks and later chapters, we'll get more into some of these concepts. For example, mission statement and actually strategic planning and strategic implementation will be covered a little later. Again, this is just an overview chapter, and it should be relatively quick to get through. So what do we mean when we're talking about planning? Well, any organization needs to set a course of action or a plan for their organization, right? Because we're dealing with uncertainty. There's a lot of variables that go on. We talked about the environment, the task environment, and the general environment. So there's a lot of things going on. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of ambiguity, meaning that we can't really define what some of the issues or problems are or what they're going to be. So planning kind of helps us deal with that uncertainty. So it helps us do that by setting a future course of action, because we want to achieve some type of results, right? We want to either increase sales or increase profits. We want to do something. So we need to set a plan that's going to guide us in that course of action. Otherwise, it's almost like a rudderless ship. We don't know where we're going. We're just heading out there into the wide open water. So planning helps us deal with uncertainty. It also helps us to set specific goals for the organization. And again, as you see, different levels of the organization. I think we covered levels of the organization in chapter 1 or 2. Different levels of the organization are going to have different responsibilities in terms of setting strategy and in terms of setting goals. And as you can imagine, the goals are going to look very different depending on what level of the organization we're talking about. So some of the things that are discussed in the business world or that are executed in the business world. The first one is a business plan. And for the business majors in this course, at some point you're going to be constructing a business plan of your own. And really, when we're talking about starting a new business, when we're talking about getting into a new line of business, when we're talking about maybe looking for new equipment and asking the bank for loans, we're going to have to develop a business plan. And a business plan is a document that outlines our goals and our strategy for achieving them. Okay, so it's going to include things like what are our goals? What is the purpose of what we're trying to do, whether it's starting a business or getting into a new line of business? How are we going to achieve that? How are we going to market the product? Who are going to be the people who are managing this endeavor? What are the financials involved? Looking out maybe 3 to 5 years. When are we going to start realizing a profit based on this new business plan? So those are the things that are contained within the business plan. Again, it's something business students will have to compile as they move through their program. A business model, in essence, is how are you going to make money, right? How is it that you are going to make money? And in the old days, when I say the old days, the 80s and the 90s, we had manufacturing centers and automobile manufacturers, and it was very simple. We're going to make money by manufacturing and selling cars, automobiles, being innovative in our approach to how we do that, how we manufacture, how we sell. It gets a little more complicated in today's business environment because we have organizations like Facebook and Snapchat where the business model isn't necessarily defined, especially in terms of how are we going to make money. So a lot of these companies, like the Snapchats, like the Facebooks, have difficulty sometimes attracting investors or realizing their potential because they never fully develop a business model. How are we going to make money? I think Facebook has kind of tackled that task by advertising and things like that. And I think there's premium editions, but some other companies haven't. And you'll see companies like Yahoo fail where Google does very well. And why is that? Well, it has to do with planning and strategy. and carrying out that strategy, and also having a firm business model. Here is how we're going to make money as we move along, as we progress, as we mature as an organization. So what is so we're looking at planning, and strategy really is a function within planning. It's a large-scale action plan as a strategy that sets the direction for the entire organization. Okay, so that's a, when we talk about planning, strategy is kind of that overarching plan for the entire organization. It represents an educated guess about what must be done long term. Now, again, we're dealing with very uncertain times. So there's a group of individuals who say, well, maybe strategic planning is kind of out because we're taking a long-term approach, and we're trying to figure out where the company is going to be maybe 3, 5, 7 years from now. And sometimes that's very difficult. A lot of things change environmentally, socially, that really put a damper on whatever the strategic plan was that an organization has. So, it really is what it says there. It's an educated guess. Does it come to fruition completely as outlined? Probably not. There's going to be changes along the way. And that's why you should review your strategic plan every so often. It could be every 6 months, every year, because things are going to change along the way. Strategic management is a process that involves managing from all parts of the organization. So again, a little later we're going to discuss the levels within an organization and their responsibilities in terms of strategic planning. So the process is, first of all, we establish a mission and a vision, and we'll cover mission statements and vision statements a little more in the next chapter. But we'll talk a little bit about them here. Assess current reality. Where are we right now? Where do we stand? What are our biggest obstacles? Who are our competitors? And then formulate a grand strategy and strategic, tactical, and operational plans. We'll cover those a little later in this chapter, but we're also going to cover grand strategies in the next chapter. And there's really only 3 grand strategies that we're going to cover, but you need to know on a large scale, what is it that we're looking to do? Are we looking to grow? Are we looking right now to just kind of stay where we are as we are in terms of sales and growth? Or are we looking to retrench, which is kind of pulling back a little bit? And a lot of time pulling back is a good strategy because where we have an economic downturn or something's going on in the economy where growth is not possible, and we may need to lay some people off. We may need to do some of those things because we see a pullback in our growth. Then we implement the strategy and, of course, maintain strategic control. And that means revisiting our strategic plan every so often. We don't just set a strategic plan and say, all right, 7 years from now, we'll come back and see how we did. It has to be revisited often. So why planning and strategic management are important? Provide direction and momentum for the organization. Again, otherwise we're a rudderless ship going along. It encourages new ideas, because as we follow this plan, as we watch this plan develop, hopefully we're going to say, here's a different direction, here's a different idea, here's some innovative approach that we haven't thought about. And then we need to develop a sustainable competitive advantage. You're going to hear that term a lot within this course. A sustainable competitive advantage. So we need to do something better, something different than our competition. That different thing needs to give us an advantage, right? It can't just be something that doesn't matter, doesn't mean anything. It has to give us a competitive advantage. And the only way that competitive advantage is going to be worthwhile if it's sustainable, right? Sustainable means we can carry it on. We can carry this advantage year over year over year over our competition. And they are just not able to replicate what it is that we're doing. So whether it's people, whether it's process, whether it's distribution, whether it's technology, whatever that is, we need to maintain that advantage over our competition. And that's not easy because a lot of things are easy to mimic. I can walk into pretty much any store and say, here's what they're doing and here's what they're doing maybe somewhat differently. But what is it that makes a sustainable competitive advantage and something that's hard to duplicate from the competition? So making plans, we have our mission statement. What is our reason for being is the mission statement. Why are we here? Why are we in business? And it is just that. For those of you who aren't familiar with mission statement, it is a statement that we will write up, that we'll put on the wall, that hopefully our employees will embrace because it really does set the direction for the company. It says, why are we here? Why are we doing what we do? And hopefully it inspires people to some degree. The vision statement is, what do we want to become? We have the vision to be the best we have the vision to become the best technology company. Our vision is to change the world. It is something that, here is what we aspire to do. Strategic planning then is done by the top management. As usually, the timeline is usually 1 to 5 years. And I would say probably closer to that 5 years than it is the 1 year, like a 3 to 5 years for strategic planning. Tactical planning is done by middle managers. Remember, we talked about the organization. We have top management, middle management, and lower management. So tactical planning is done by middle managers for the next 6 to 24 months, roughly. And then operational planning is done by the first level managers for the next 1 to maybe 52 weeks. So it's done on a weekly planning basis. So a strategic plan set out by upper management might be to increase our East regional sales by 5% year over year for the next 5 years. So then the tactical plan by middle management might be, okay, we are going to bring on an additional 10 salespeople for this East region so we can expand coverage. And then an operational plan might be, okay, over the next year, we are going to increase our sales, or maybe, weekly. Over the next 52 weeks, we are going to increase our weekly sales calls by 3 per week to increase coverage. So you see how we set a strategic plan, middle management has their tactical plan, then there's an operational plan that's followed through at maybe a lower level. So again, the mission statement expresses the purpose of the organization. It really does talk about who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And if those things are present in a mission statement, usually they inspire the employees of the organization. And the vision expresses what the organization wants to become, where it is going strategically. So just a few examples of mission statements. Amazon, our vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. So we have a focus on our customers to build a place where people can come and find and discover anything they might want to buy online. So, that's a pretty broad mission statement. We are an online retailer. We want to be your one-stop shop for everything that it is you can buy. And we're going to do that in a very consumer-friendly, consumer-centric fashion. Well, actually, I'm reading that as a mission. That's a vision. So, maybe Amazon isn't quite there yet, but their vision is to eventually sell everything and have everybody go to them online and be very customer centric. Patagonia is, we prefer the human scale to the corporate, vagabonding to tourism, and the quirky to tone down and flatten out. So this is I believe, a travel company, and they're presenting a unique experience to the vacationer, somebody who's looking for something a little different. So those are two examples of vision statements. And then we talked about the levels of management: top management, middle management, first level management, and the strategic, tactical, and operation planning of each. So that's a slide you should kind of look over and go over. Goals are specific commitments to achieve a measurable result over a stated period of time. So that's very important to understand that definition of a goal. And of course, there's strategic, tactical, and operational plans. So within our strategic planning, within our strategy, we're going to have goals, and they need to be specific and measurable and over a stated period of time. We'll look at another slide later that talks about SMART goal setting, which encompasses all of those. Goals are also known as objectives, and again, they can be strategic, tactical, or operational in nature. Strategic goals are set by the top management and focus on objectives for the organization as a whole: increasing sales by 5%, increasing profits by 8%. Those are the types of strategic goals set by management. Tactical goals are set by middle managers and focus on the actions needed to achieve the strategic goal. How are we going to increase profits? Well, we're going to cut the sales force. We're going to cut expenses here. We're going to do this. Those are tactical goals. And remember, they need to be specific over a certain period of time. So we will cut expenses by 3% a year over year for the next 5 years. That sets a very specific timetable type goal. Operational goals are set by frontline managers and are concerned with short-term matters associated with realizing tactical goals. So again, it all flows from the top of the organization. Here's what the strategic goals set by the top of the organization. Then my tactical and operational goals, however many they may be, will flow from that. Different types of plans. There are two different types of plans. There's standing plans and there's single-use plans. Standing plans are for activities that occur repeatedly over a period of time, right? So we're going to have normal operations. We're going to have normal things that are going on, normal activities that are going on. Our standing plans are, these are what governs the standing plans that we have. And there's three. There's policy, procedures, and rules. And there's differences between those three. We may use them interchangeably, but there are differences between the three. Policies are general responses to a designated problem or situation. General responses. So I think the book uses the example that we have employees cannot use foul language on the premise. It's very general, right? It allows some room for interpretation within the ranks of management, right? So that's a policy. Our policy is no foul language on the premise. And then it's up to the manager to interpret what may or may not be a violation of that policy. A procedure outlines a response to a particular problem or circumstance. So we have a lot of standard operating procedures within the organization. It's just a response to a problem or a circumstance that might come up. A rule designates a specific required action. This is a no smoking facility. That's very specific, right? There's no room for interpretation where you're smoking or where you're not smoking. You either were or you weren't. And our rule says this is a no smoking facility. So if you're caught smoking, that's a clear violation of the rule. So those are your standing plans. Then what you have is you have single-use plans. And single-use plans are for activities that are not likely to be repeated in the future. That's why they're called single-use plans. And there's programs and there's projects. A program encompasses a range of projects or activities. So a program is broader, is larger in scope, and it's really, it's a single use or a single type activity, but it encompasses a wide range of things. A project has less scope and complexity than a program. A project could just be, we're going to install a new heating system, or it's very narrow in scope. Versus a program is we're gonna overhaul the entire ventilation system in the structure. So one is broader in scope, one is a little narrower in focus and scope. So back to SMART goals now. Again, the acronym SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, because that's important, right? Because if we set goals that aren't attainable, we're going to increase sales by 800% year over year. It's not an attainable goal. Specific, but it's not attainable. So non-attainable goals people give up. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't try to achieve what they call stretch goals. Stretch goals are, here's what we think is achievable. We're going to push beyond that a little bit, just to push the boundaries of individuals. But you have to be careful how far you push that stretch goal, because after not too long, it can become pretty much unattainable. Results oriented, we need to see some type of result at the end. It can't be, I want to be more customer friendly. That might be something that's not results oriented versus the survey that we give results. I want to go from a 4.5 to increase to a 4.7. That's more results oriented, and it's something that's measurable too. And I want to have a timeline. I want to have target dates set for my goal. So remember the SMART acronym: specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and there's target dates set to it. There's something called management by objectives, and it's a 4-step process for setting goals, and in turn, motivating employees. And the 4 steps are managers and employees are jointly setting objectives for the employee. So the manager, the employees sit down and together they're setting the goals using the SMART format, right? But together they're setting goals. What is it you could achieve? What are you looking at doing over the next year? And together the manager and the employee set their goals. So right off the bat you have employee buy-in because they're participating in this process of setting their own goals. Then manager develops an action plan for the employee. And then the manager or the employee periodically review the performance. So it's not something you set in January and then revisit in December. You're doing it monthly or quarterly where you're revisiting it and reviewing the performance and how you're doing. And again, these things may need to be modified as you're moving along because the circumstances are going to change. Then the manager makes a performance appraisal and rewards the employee according to the results at the end of whatever time period it might be. So you can see, again, this is a joint process. It gets employee buy-in because they're involved in the process. And it involves periodic reviews, which a lot of companies don't do. A lot of companies will say, set them in January, see you in December. And that shouldn't be the case because these things are going to change. And there needs to be some level of control. The employee may need to be, maybe reinforced or reinformed about what their goals were and how to achieve them. Okay, so that's our presentation on Chapter 5. Again, it was highly definitional. We're going to get heavy into these concepts in the next chapter when we talk about strategic planning and strategic implementation and the tools that we could use as managers to kind of do or perform some of the things that we talked about in this chapter. So really, there's some highlights in the chapter. Strategic, just planning in general. What does it mean? Strategic planning and goal setting on different levels within the organization. What is our mission and vision statement, which again we'll cover in the next chapter. Goal setting. What is the SMART goal acronym? What does it mean? Why is it good? And then management by objectives. Again, what is that 4-step process and why do managers use it?